My name is Mercer Hall. I'm a 7th and 8th grade history teacher. I'm also an education writer and blogger. And I think one of the most fascinating things about learning today, but also one of the greatest challenges, is helping students and educators make sense of the vast array of visual information streaming in at any given moment. And in a sense, it's about taking control of the visual classroom, because a lot of learning today has to do with understanding the design of information. If you think about students and you give them a choice on how they want to learn, they will immediately turn to all sorts of visual stimuli. So for example, they'll go to their phones and their tablets, laptops, video games. They'll turn to social media and YouTube. And it's not just based in technology. They prefer graphic novels and comics, and even walking down the streets, the billboards are flashing information at us at a constant rate. And so how to parse that and make it more dissectable for them is an enormous challenge. And as teachers, we often don't think as well that all of our disciplines, no matter what course, they all involve pictures and images and diagrams and graphs and charts and maps and political cartoons, and even physical education teachers are drawing diagrams for football or basketball or architectural blueprints, or perhaps musical notes on the page, and English teachers are diagramming story arcs. So there's a tremendous amount of visual information out there. And sometimes that literacy gets overlooked a little bit. That literacy is often known as graphicacy. Graphicacy stands equally with numeracy and oracy and traditional reading and writing literacy as one of the main pillars of education that, especially today in contemporary learning, really should be incorporated. Graphicacy began in the 1960s in South Africa, based in geography and maps, and that's not surprising because those are often known as the purest form of visualizations. But graphicacy today combines two things which sometimes can be used interchangeably, and they probably shouldn't be. And that's visual literacy and visual thinking. And they're really not the same thing. Visual literacy is about reading and understanding. So in a sense, that's about decoding an image and what is it trying to tell me. Visual thinking, though, is something different. Visual thinking is about the creation. It's about inventing. It's about encoding. And so you really have two sides of what becomes known as graphicacy, the decoding side and the encoding side. And given a choice, if you say to students, what kind of a learner do you think you are, depending on what you believe about learning modalities, about 90% of the hands will go up and they'll claim that they are visual learners. And any research shows that that's probably not the case. So it might be as low as 1/3, maybe as high as 2/3, but in some sense you have students preferring visual media, but maybe working against their own self-interest. And if you also think about the brain-based science, you have images can be understood by the brain 60,000 times more quickly than text. And if you think about how we recall and remember information, they say that we remember about 10% of what we hear, maybe 20% of what we read, but the brain remembers 80% of what it sees. And so all this means that teachers can be a little bit more intentional about how they're teaching these skills. And so there are a lot of great frameworks out there for how to do that. One of the things that we like to use is sort of looking at an image. There's something called the 4 S's. And it's a way of slowing down a little bit and saying whether I'm looking at a map or a mathematical diagram or a political cartoon, I want to start with the first thing, the substance. It's the what am I looking at, without interpreting, just trying to make sure I'm appreciating all the details. And then we go into the scaffold. How is the image arranged? Does it have an XY axis, or does it have a title or a label? And then you get into the story. That's the meaning. That's what is the artist trying to say. And then finally, you get to the so what. That's the how do I connect this to my learning? Why am I even bothering? So taking the time in class for teachers to hone those skills of graphicacy, I think, is crucial. And the second thing, which maybe is equally as important, is about as an educator. Every educator, whether consciously or not, is a designer. Every time they hand out a piece of paper or a test or a quiz or put up a PowerPoint, are they thinking about how it's arranged? Are they thinking about hue and background and color and emphasis? And a little more thought there can really transform the learning for the students. So, for example, are they thinking about pre-attentive attributes? Pre-attentive attributes are those things that our brain notices before we're even conscious of how we process it. So color, size, motion, orientation. If you walk into a room, the first thing you'll notice are the lights or the colors. And the same is true with a handout or a worksheet or a test or a quiz. So a little more thought in that sense by teachers can really help the students prioritize their learning. And so in final thought, it's not about being an artist, because very few teachers are actually artists, but thinking a little bit more like a designer helps them understand the visual array of information. And so it has to go with that sense of decoding information, but also encoding it. And together, that, in a modern sense, is probably the greatest priority in our classrooms.